at some point the companies will kind of crack and start trying to persuade Donald Trump to make America seem like a reliable partner again, because I think that is the problem at the moment, is those US defence companies aren't going to get huge deals abroad without those countries feeling like they can rely on it.
Delighted to have Larisa Brown, the Times' defence editor, with me in the studio. Larisa, hi.
Hi.
Arms fairs are a chance for military suppliers to show off the best kit, the brightest kit, their new products. But now they're talking about desensitised weapons. Well, what are they?
Well, what's happening is defence companies are becoming quite nervous about using any US components in their military equipment or weapons. And so increasingly, we found that British and European companies are instead opting for what's deemed ITAR-free products, which are products that basically don't come under certain restrictions from the American government, and therefore they are not components from America, and instead they're trying to get components from Britain and Europe. Now, this has become, a key factor when these companies are considering what they put into their weapons. More recently, because of Donald Trump's behaviour, he's obviously increasingly seen as unreliable when it comes to defence equipment, basically.
What kind of weapons are we talking about? Is this the very high-tech stuff or the whole range?
It's everything, really. So a while ago, a few years ago, companies might have a discussion where they're trying to sell a product to another, to a government or another company, and they would discuss maybe at some point during that meeting, maybe possibly at the end, whether the equipment is ITAR free or not. So whether it doesn't have any US components and therefore doesn't come under US restrictions. Now, however, we were told by one defence company that when they're going into a meeting to sell those products and export them, the first question that people are asking is that component, is that weapon ITAR free? Because what they're concerned about is in the future, Donald Trump's administration could prevent that company from selling their products to certain countries. And there's this increasing nervousness across Britain and Europe that the Americans aren't seen as a reliable partner anymore.
For those of us with only a vague awareness of ITAR, the International Traffic in Arms Regulations, what is that? What exactly does it do? Is this all just about re-exporting products once you own them? Basically,
it just means that if a company has a product that is contains a US component, then it's deemed to come under these ITAR restrictions, and that means that the company can't just resell that product anywhere, or sell what they've created to any country without asking for US approval first. And I was also told that it's even a restriction if a British company employs a veteran or a former American civil servant in their company. They also might come under these ITAR restrictions, which means that they could struggle to sell that product to another country or government or company without asking for US approval. So it's deemed to be a pretty big deal, and it has hindered companies in the past, but more recently they've become a lot more worried about ITAR goods.
It seems like it's not just ITAR, the blocking of resale or passing weapons on. There's also a concern that the US could block weapons from working or even this maintenance and upgrade of those weapons.
Yes, this is another concern that one company pointed out to us, that what they would fear is that in the future they might need upgrades or maintenance on a specific piece of equipment, and actually they wouldn't be able to get that without US approval. So it could mean that a piece of equipment becomes obsolete as a result of US restrictions. So that's another concern that they have.
Is this all bad news for US defence companies, good news for European ones?
I think that's a pretty fair summary. I spoke to one defence expert who said that, Francis Tusa, actually, a defence analyst, and he was saying that essentially, US Donald Trump has meant that people no longer feel like they can rely on US defence companies, which is obviously going to be a huge shock to those big US defence companies that were hoping to market their products abroad.
We've seen this 150 billion euro European defence fund, which started with a kind of buy Europe by EU member state provided weapons. It feels like that rule might be changing slightly, but not to include American weapons.
We've reported in the Times today, actually, that the government is close to signing a deal on all of that. And yes, it looks like Britain will be able to sell their weapons and be part of the deal. However, it's unlikely that the Americans will be able to be part of that.
Britain has had at least 70 years of very close Anglo-American cooperation. The RAF relies on US-provided products, technology. How long would it take to decouple, to end that relationship?
I think it would be extremely difficult for us to completely end that relationship with the Americans, because every major defense program that I can think of is, somehow intertwined with the Americans. I mean, to completely free ourselves from America would take decades, and it would cost far too much money. I think, though, what we will see is an increasing cooperation with European governments and companies instead of the Americans. And whilst we will still need high-tech American kit, because the Americans often do provide, the cream of the weapons, I think that where we can, I think we will have many more sovereign equipment and products being developed here.
Are there implications where militaries are working together in a conflict zone? Say, if we think of Afghanistan, where there was a US mission which was working with the Danes and with the Brits. Does this move away from US weapons? Does that change how they would work together?
I think we still need. I mean, it depends where we were going and what the conflict was. But at the moment, we're still very reliant on America just for a lot of their enablers, like logistics, supply trucks, and things. So we couldn't do a deployment like we did in Afghanistan, an operation like that, without the help of the Americans at the moment. But I think increasingly the UK Ministry of Defence is hoping to be able to build up its capabilities, build up the army and its modernisation programme, and be able to do more independently without the need for the Americans.
When countries are considering what to buy, is this mostly or only a consideration for allies of the US, or is this a more broad decision that's going on?
I'm not sure about further afield. I mean, presumably there will be a feeling amongst a lot of countries that are bearing the brunt of these trade tariffs and other decisions by Trump, that will be thinking, can we rely on America in future? I'm sure that will be the case.
Clearly, the US must know this is happening. It's a very broad thing that's going on. Do you think they'll try and stop it? And if they did, how would they go about that?
I'm sure that at some point the companies will kind of crack and start trying to persuade Donald Trump to make America seem like a reliable partner again, because I think that is the problem at the moment, is those US defense companies aren't going to get huge deals abroad without those countries feeling like they can rely on America for all of that. I mean, just take the example of BAE. We had our splash this week on the front page of the Times, which was talking about BAE announcing this decision to start producing their own explosives in the UK. Now, we haven't had that capability before, and previously BAE would import RDX explosives from the US and France, and then they'd use those explosives to make 155mm ammunition rounds. Now, what BAE are aware of is that if we did face a conflict in future, then the demand for explosive material would go up significantly, and therefore the UK needs to be able to produce that on its own in case there was a war. And so that's what they're looking to do at the moment, and they're significantly ramping up their ability to actually produce their own explosives using automated technology.
So seeing munitions, artillery, the very high-end weapon systems, countries looking for these sovereign capabilities. What do you think they would want the US to do to avoid this push away? Is there something that Donald Trump could change in how he acts?
I think in this particular example, I don't think that there's anything necessarily that the Americans could do. I think generally the UK and BAE and the government has sort of woken up to the fact that you do need to have the ability to produce things like this on your own soil, because there is an increasing risk of us facing a war in the near future. I think generally, though, obviously it comes as, wider British and European companies are concerned just generally about relying on America because it's not considered the ally that it once was.
And is there coming back from this? Do you think we see a new president at the next electoral cycle? Will things go back to the historical norms?
I think that what Trump has done has pushed the British and the Europeans in a direction that won't suddenly reverse if we get a new president in a few years' time. I think that generally the UK and Europe has woken up to the fact that it needs to invest more in its own defence and can't just rely on the Americans to provide that. I mean, also, I think that, whether JD Vance would come next, I know that actually American officials have warned people in the UK that don't just assume that this is just something that's going to happen for the next few years and then the problem will go away and we'll all go back to normal. And actually the government here should be preparing for the fact that this is a long-term strategy by the Americans, and we should make sure that we actually are investing as much as we can in our defence.
Larisa Brown, The Times' defence editor, thank you so much.
Thank you.